everyone. How is everyone doing? Welcome back to Worldbuilders Weekly. I'm Zay, the Director of Operations. Today we have a couple different people joining us.
My name is Beth, and I work with Worldbuilders as the Chief Marketer and Executive Marketer of all things marketing and digital. It's a great title.
Official title.
It's a really long nameplate that goes on the door. They had to get me a really big door, you know.
We also have one of our Worldbuilders board members, Dana. Welcome, Dana.
Hello, Zay and Beth. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You guys know the drill. Every week you come back, hang out with a couple of geeks. We have deals from the market that we talk about, some nerdy tangents, plenty of geeks doing good stories. And as always, thank you for your incredible support. We'll move on to a couple announcements and then we will pick Dana's brain. Literally on screen. It's going to be terrifying.
Get out. Zay and I will also make fun of each other relentlessly.
I don't know what you're talking about. We have today we now have Root available at Worldbuilders, and it was a previously hard to find game. It's very fun and popular, and we will have a stop motion video. I don't know, Gray, if that is something that is coming up or if that's something we plan on putting up on the screen here. Oh, and here it is right on the screen. Thank you, Zoe, for making that. That's lovely.
Oh, I haven't seen this either. This is super cute.
Yeah, a little bit more about Root. This is Ledger Games releasing their second expansion pack Kickstarter tomorrow. So that'll be cool. We are going to have the founder of Ledger Games and the designer of Root on next week's World Builder Weekly, so join us for that. We actually have quite a few guests coming on for our lineup of March. Beth, do you want to talk about some of those people?
Yeah, we will have S.B. Divya, the author of Machine Hood, which is coming out in March, and it is available for pre-order now. And Suyi Davies Okimbawa, who is the author of the upcoming Son of the Storm.
We'll also have a live play of Trust Me, I'm a Superhero, followed by a Worldbuilders After Dark with the crew of Half Monster Games later in the evening. That should be super fun. I'm very excited to bring some of those back. Let's run through some trivia questions. The old one first. For the old one, feel free to throw an answer in here, guys, last minute if you feel up to it. And then for the new trivia question, as you know, please answer in our DMs and not in the chat.
All right, our old trivia question is Agent Mothman, Agent Dark Booty, and Agent Nessie are part of, hold it together, say, are part of which fictional organization?
I'm sorry, it's just such a silly name. Dark Booty. Okay, I'm over it.
She's not, but we'll move on. And the answer is the Swollen Eyeball Network. And I actually don't know, like, what is that from? Like, what fictional organization in what world? Cindy?
Dana, do you have any idea?
Oh, that explains it.
Yeah, I actually don't remember any of these agents being part of it. At this point, all I remember from Invader Zim is the different like, what are those called? One-liners that they would do. Yeah, exactly. The little sounds from the show. Our new trivia question: what phrase uttered by Greedo and Sebulba in Star Wars means "this will be the end of you"? Again, please don't answer this in the chat this time. Send it to our DMs, and if you get it right, you'll be entered into our monthly prize draw for whoever gets them good wins. All right. Just curious, Dana, are you a Star Wars fan? Do you know any of?
I am a Star Wars fan. Am I a person that remembers movie lines, fan? Zero. I have zero movie lines in my head. But yeah, love Star Wars.
The best movie lines for some reason that stuck with me are like The Big Lebowski. Uh, other than
That's
that,
valid.
and Dana is like so immediately over. Yeah, it's not like a particularly good movie, but it's in my head.
I will say, so there is a fun conversation I have actually all the time with all of my white friends, really, who love this movie, and all of my black friends who are like, I just don't get it. I never, although it taught me what White Russians were, and that is worth the price of admission because those are really tasty drinks.
That's all right. I'm about to get kicked off of this Worldbuilders Weekly, but I never get the appeal of like musical number shows. Like I am not a fan of Grease. The best I could give someone is like Rocky Horror Picture Show. I especially loathe Disney sing-alongs. I
Oh my
can't
God.
get into it. I don't know why, but I apparently ruining my credibility with Dana as the further we go on here. That's all right.
Really, you've given me ammo with which to annoy you
Yeah.
for the rest of forever.
I
So
think
you have
everyone
done
still
this.
remembers when I had some choice words towards Nathan Fillion, who is such a nice actor. So I just, it's fine. Here's a real intro to Dana. Totally over Zay, Dana Pellebon is a community activist and co-executive director of the Rape Crisis Center in Dane County. That's in Madison, Wisconsin. Where she leads their counseling and advocacy services and coordinates community partnerships for community-wide sexual assault victim services. That's a sentence. She is currently on the board of directors for the Outreach LGBTQ plus Center and the Worldbuilders board. She has extensive experience working with persons experiencing homelessness through her work as the director of housing and operations for Porchlight. Her activism extends to all aspects of her life as a theater professional and is the co-founder of the Loud and Unchained Black Theater Festival and the owner of the Madison Theater Collective. All right. That is quite the bio.
Yeah, they forced me to write those things, and then I've got to put it all in a list.
How long did you get to go without having to have an official bio?
Well, let's see, I'm 45. So almost through all 45 years, because I really worked hard to not have to do that.
Yeah. I also don't have an official bio. If I can get to 45, I'm getting close to 30. I think that would be a win. You deserve a plaque, I think.
I agree.
So the first thing we have in the script is kind of funny because it just vaguely says, tell us about your involvement in nonprofits, which I mean, we just, as we mentioned, you have quite a bit of involvement. Why don't we jump into like Beth's first question here of you're really involved in nonprofits from your extensive resume. Why don't you tell us about how you initially gravitated towards nonprofit work?
So I spent 16 years doing corporate real estate and marketing and sales. I was actually marketing director for a large real estate firm here in Madison. And I honestly, I got tired of making money for rich folks. And I had already been in my personal life trying to figure out ways to help people and creating programs outside of my job to help single mothers in particular. And so as I was looking through what it was I wanted to do with my life, the opportunity to work for Porchlight came along. And that was really my foray into working for a not-for-profit. And I was there for about 7-8 years. But before then, I actually was a board member for the Domestic Abuse Intervention Center Services, DAYS, that's also in Madison. I came across DAYS because in my 20s, I had a friend that was going through domestic abuse, and we didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to do. And we back then pulled out the phone book to say, what's next? Who do we turn to? And we turned to DAYS, and they gave us the information that we needed to help keep her and her kids safe, gave us advocacy services, just learned a lot. So after a few years, I connected with their group again and joined their board. And that's when I started to learn about board service, was working with DAYS.
When you say, you know, kind of back in the day, I'm curious, do you feel like there is more available resources to people nowadays, or do you feel like maybe they're just more accessible? I'm wondering, you know.
So there is definitely more services available now. So, you know, 20 years ago, there were not services that were culturally competent service providers. Whereas now we have organizations that are specifically focused on liberation of Black folks, that are specifically focused on anti-oppression for Indigenous persons. So, you know, and Latinx persons. So there is a shift in how not-for-profits are working through things, and it's a good shift. So before, the idea was that, well, there's domestic violence, I'll just use as an example, or sexual assault, and it affects everyone equally. But what we know about oppression, and sexual violence and domestic abuse are all forms of oppression. What we learned about oppression is that oppression affects people differently. And so how you treat oppression for one group is not necessarily the most effective way to address oppression for persons who are most marginalized and most impacted by that oppression. So the nice change in not-for-profits is that they are expanding how it is that they view how oppression works and what services look like for different people, because they don't look the same.
Yeah, that kind of leads into one of the questions that I had preparing for this, is that, so you've already talked, like there's a lot of intersectionality of the work that you do, not only combating maybe like, you know, homeless mothers, or, you know, mothers who are victims of domestic abuse, but also, you know, then what happens when you intersect it with a Black mother, a Latinx mother, you know, and that kind of thing. And now, as of 2020, we have COVID. So we've added like another whole layer, especially with a lot of those communities now. They already have problems with the medical system, you know, and then now we bring on COVID, which is this huge medical ordeal. So what are some of the things that you're seeing specifically as a method of spreading more awareness to the world outside of our own, that, you know, were previously already disadvantaged? Now with COVID, what are some of the things that these communities are struggling with now, with the onset of that previously, you know, wasn't something they had to deal with outside of a global pandemic?
So the big thing that's happening right now is vaccination, and what that means and looks like for those communities that are most impacted, and trust of that vaccination, trust of the medical community in general. You know, we know that there are disparate outcomes, and I will specifically use Black women. We know that there are disparate outcomes for Black women medically. So how then do I tell a Black woman, you need to get this vaccination, knowing that how research and how people are cared for once there is a medical issue is going to be very different. How then do I say, oh, well, just go ahead and get this? That's a hard conversation to have. And instead, I just give out information. So I'm vaccinated, but there are people even in my family who have decided to not. And so what I have said for myself is that I don't place judgment upon people, because again, how do I tell someone who has been impacted that that impact does not affect decisions moving forward? They also have to be able to see that that they are cared for in the same manner, which has already gone south for something like vaccinations. When you look at who is vaccinated, who is offered vaccinations, there are full communities of persons who have class advantage that are getting access beforehand, that have a better access to education about the vaccines, better trust with the doctors. So they are expecting communities who have not had that trust built with them to then automatically trust something that, one, they can see has not worked for them, and two, that they see is not for them, being that it's not being brought to their communities in the same way. So what COVID has done more than anything is highlight disparate impacts for people. You know, when you look at job losses, for example, job losses almost exclusively affect women, and then affect women of color out of the women that are affected. So COVID is hard on many different levels. It's medically hard, and then the socioeconomic impacts are also devastating for communities of color.
Yeah, I saw a statistic not too long ago that they did a survey of doctors or in the medical community that said that they still believed that Black women did not feel as much pain as other people. Imagine going to the doctor and knowing that as like that is going to be how you're treated. And like, it's just absolutely embarrassing, for one, that that's still a mentality that people hold. But I think that statistic alone really brings in the idea that, you know, it's hard to gain trust with people who know that they face that when they go to the doctor, even just not during a pandemic. And that remembering that when people, which you see sometimes, shame other people, like, oh, you're not going to get vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. It's like, hold up. What is this community's experience with the medical system? Calm down. And like understanding that, like, to begin with, is just absolutely unreal.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we could also talk for hours about the lack of research when it comes to female or Black specific you know, health issues and how those intertwine, and the lack of knowledge around those. I'm curious, Dana, do you see any attempt between nonprofits and the medical community to try to, you know, bridge those gaps, whether it be COVID or not, and to build that trust again?
So there are activists in every aspect of every community, and that includes the medical field. So, and there are people who are willing to make changes, and there are people who are not willing to listen, the same as everything else. So are there people out there doing hard work in this field? Absolutely, there are. You know, I work a lot with UW-Madison here, and we talk about those things. I know I have gone to several symposiums with first-year med students where we talk about things like the intersectionality of experiencing homelessness, the intersectionality of race and gender when they are treating persons. So they're starting those conversations, but we have a long, long way to go.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Beth.
I was going to say, like, how obviously, you know, racial disparities or something, especially in, I mean, if you walked out of 2020 and still say there are no racial disparities, like, I don't know what to tell you, but like, obviously, like racial disparities has been very much, and rightfully so, highlighted in our recent history is in the last year. And you said you work with the medical community on addressing some of those. How long have those conversations been going on within the medical community, specifically like the ones that you're liaising to kind of start?
So all of these conversations are not new conversations.
Okay.
And, you know, the conversations were happening back when they were utilizing Black women's bodies for gynecological research, live Black women's bodies for gynecological research. It's a matter of who is listening to those conversations and who deems those conversations worthy of conversations. So for my community, 2020 has not been a change for me. 2020 has been more of a watching other people catching up. So I grew up knowing about these things because these are things that my family has talked about. These are things that we have experienced. These are things that historically are spoken generation to generation, because we have to warn and prepare our children for how it is that they move through this world. So in doing that, we also have to fight against systems. So when my son was born, and then when he was diagnosed with autism, I had to fight through systems to get him the same treatment that other kids may have gotten without as much fight, right? So these are generational conversations because they're generational traumas. How it has affected the world outside of us, I suppose, is new for a lot of people. But it's not a fight that is new, and it is not a conversation that is new.
Yeah, I think it's important when you said like the conversation isn't new, but who's listening is. And that's the change that's happening. And that was what I was just curious about, of like how much has that shift happened in, you know, 2 years or 5 years, you know, that like like 2020, like you said, it was a light bulb for a moment for a lot of people, you know, that the listeners changed. And I think that is really, I think, the key of that. It's like conversation has been happening. What's changing is the listeners.
Yeah.
Say that you have another. Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. As what I've seen, so social media wise, 5-6 years ago, I have been having these conversations, for example, on my Facebook for a very long time. How people responded to those conversations 5-6 years ago, it's interesting as I go through my Facebook memories, because I do that. When you're old, you like to remember things. So as I go through my Facebook memories and I see conversations that I used to have with people who now are real woke and very progressive, and I was lambasted a lot and told that I was a race baiter, and told that that I needed to focus on not seeing color. So there's all of these racist tropes that good liberals played into and continue to play into. But now that we have George Floyd and people are having to listen, they're having to do a little bit more inquiry into what it is they think and why. And so those are interesting moments for people like me who have been having these conversations for a really long time, who are now watching people who were really awful, who are on their Facebook saying all of these really great progressive things without recognizing the harm that they had caused for years beforehand. But right now that's the cause celeb without the actual inquiry into their behavior and inquiry into what is actually happening, instead of just focusing on what is the problem, how is it that I can contribute and utilize my privilege and my standing to be able to stop oppression for other people. So that has been the hard part of 2020 for me and my folks, is not watching what happens on TV, because that's always happened. It's watching people process through things that have been our lives and our livelihoods, utilizing it for profit, one, utilizing it for clout, and still not offering the respect and centeredness of Blackness, in my case, and womanhood for my case. So that has been the rough part of 2020, not hearing all the things, but watching people navigate through that without really being at inquiry with themselves about what that means and what that looks like.
Talking about this kind of intersectionality and people learning, you also work with the LGBTQ community. I don't know if you yourself are part of that community, and I don't like to lump things together. I don't, Black issues and LGBTQ issues are very different. But we did have a question in the chat about the idea of allies, and how do you feel about the idea of allies?
I don't feel anything about the idea of allies. And I know that there's language about people don't want allies, they want co-conspirators. What I want is for people to not be jackasses and to not be oppressive, and to work through, to listen to persons who are most impacted and most marginalized, to then in that listening, hear what it is that is needed and wanted, and then act from there. And I know that's hard, because people also like to think that they have the solutions for things, and if the solutions don't look like what they're used to looking, then that's a thing. So when I am talking about programming at both the Rape Crisis Center and at LGBT Outreach LGBTQ Center, we talk about what is the community wanting and needing, not what do we think as people here, what do we think that they want, but instead listening and talking to persons and saying what is it that the community is asking for, what is it that the community needs, and how do they want us to respond to those needs. So it's even not good enough for us to be like, great, we have this whole thing of services, come and get these services. Instead, we need to be asking, what are the services that are most prioritized by the persons most in need? And then we need to tailor our services to meet those needs.
I was just trying not to talk over you, Beth, if you had anything. We also have in here, we talk on our show a lot about biases, misconceptions when it comes to nonprofits in general. I'm curious, in your line of work, what are some of the misconceptions or biases that you see in dealing with nonprofits?
Savior syndrome. We're here to save people. That is a big thing. That is a big thing. And we're not. We are here to partner with people to help minimize the impact of patriarchy, white supremacy, sexism, racism, all of these things, oppression, to minimize the impacts of oppression. The other thing is that we're, a bunch of do-gooder hippies. I love hippie dresses. I think they're really great, especially in the summertime. But you know, that is a very white-based idea of what not-for-profits look like.
Yeah,
And
for anyone in the chat, flower children and nonprofits basically indistinguishable.
yes, and let me tell you, we are distinguishable. I am a flower haver in my vases, but other than that, there's zero of that. So you know, the big myth is that we are saviors, and some of us in the not-for-profit world fall into that trope because they believe that also. But we want to dispel that myth and dispel that idea that we're here to save people. We are not here to save people. We are here to minimize the impact of oppression.
Well done. Yeah. Beth, am I stealing all your jam?
You always do, so that's nothing new. So I'm going to steal Zay's question. We're going to kind of pivot just a little bit. When we had our end of year fundraiser, Dana, you were so wonderful to host the telethon that we had with Gideon, and you played or presented as a character, if I remember correctly, or one of your personas. Let's talk about that a little bit more. What was that, and tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So I'm assuming you're discussing what I do theatrically and burlesque.
Yes,
Yep.
all of it. Yep.
Yep. So one of the many things that I do is I am an artist. So I'm a theatrical artist, and then I am also a burlesque artist. So I produce shows, I perform in shows, I do rope artistry in burlesque. That was actually taught to me by somebody, and I won't name that person's name.
Like
but
Shibari?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, Shibari's awesome. Yep.
Yep. So yeah, I love performing. I love putting on shows. I enjoy entertaining people.
What does burlesque dancing do like for you as a person? What is it, you know, what is the good, I guess, that it brings to your life?
So when I started burlesque, I was in my 30s. I had just had a baby. So I had a little 2-year-old. I grew up in a really religious household, and was taught very clearly that women should be a certain way, they should look a certain way, they should dress a certain way. I remember having many conversations with pastors about how we should not make men stumble on their walk with God by dressing inappropriately or acting inappropriately. Right, like super toxic.
It's all on us.
Oh,
Yes.
I like it.
Yeah, hella toxic. And when my friend brought this opportunity to me, I am also a survivor of childhood sexual assault and adult sexual assault. So my connection with my body was very unclear. My connection with my sexuality was very unclear. While I knew that I was attracted to women, I suppressed that because it was a sin, according to how I was raised. So from that point, I started doing burlesque because a friend of mine who was in theater started a troupe, and she needed a producer. And it was a way for me to discard the chains of that oppression for me, and to really be able to focus on my own body expression. And what I found was that I was a Black woman on stage that was not the skinniest by far of the women that were there. And that that representation on stage, every show meant something for the women that were in the show. And we actually ended up having probably more women in shows than we did men for audience. And then, I met this really cool guy named Gray, and Gray helped me break some of those shackles also, through our friendship and relationship. So it was a way of me gaining my body autonomy and sexuality and freedom in a way that I don't know that I could have. I suppose I could have done more therapy, but I have been in therapy since I was like 12 and I hadn't made it that far. So this was like my radical therapy. And now it is about subverting the norm. So I'm a co-executive director of a major agency in Madison. I'm 45 and I put on pasties and go and do numbers. And that is okay. And it is letting people know that the bounds of, quote, respectability are not what it is that we think that they are. And or not even important. I don't know if being respectable is important, but I do know that personal expression is important, and that includes sexuality, and that includes Black women's sexuality, and includes fat women's sexuality. Yeah.
So you talked about it as a way to kind of move through your past experiences with your own trauma as it were. A friend of mine who was a man in the Twin Cities area was also in burlesque, and one of his favorite pieces to do was Let It Go, because he used it as a way of saying let it go to all the toxic masculinity that he had learned throughout his life. And he did like the full costume and everything, and like that was his piece. So like this is the second person, like from you, I'm hearing that it's like, oh yeah, like this is a way to let go of something. Sadly, he was killed in a car accident in 2015, and at his funeral party, I will say, there was face painting and tiaras included, and glitter encouraged. And if you did not have your own glitter would be provided for you if you wanted it. But that was his way of the last like couple of years before he passed away, of using burlesque to, similarly to you, shed a lot of those preconceived ideas of what, he is or his body is a man. And I'm talking like a full Elsa, and he's a big guy. He's like 6 something, like bigger, and it's just like this full Elsa dress, and he just owned it every time, and it was amazing. And I'm so sad that he's not here to hold that space anymore for other people in similar situations. But it just reminded me so similar. I'm like, oh, Jason, if you're listening today, here you go.
Yeah, I mean, art is such a, I mean, that's, you're an artist when you're dancing, and it's such a, I do visual, like traditional art, but it's such a vast world of like self-expression. And when you see people that like represent something on a stage, sorry, it's like so beautiful.
Yeah.
And when you go through things and you can I've never cried on camera before. When you can see people kind of own the things that happen to them.
Yeah.
There's a difference between putting that art on paper versus like making yourself the art. Like there's no longer that separation between what is me and then what is art. It's like, nope, it's 100% all here. Like it can be like so much more personal in that regard.
Somebody said
we
got me being a human on camera. Actually, this is wet, like tears created by my lizard costume. It's But yeah, I'm curious, Dana, what other, you can, your art, burlesque, I would say that's definitely part of the geek community. Geek is kind of just owning the things you're passionate about. What other realms of the geek community do your interests lie?
So I grew up with my dad, who was a geek, and he introduced me to Godzilla, which is the foundation of my geekhood. I actually remember when I was a kid, every week we would watch, because Saturday mornings, you know how they would have Saturday cartoons. We would have Saturday movies. We would watch a Godzilla movie. We would watch Star Trek episodes. We would watch Bruce Lee, a Bruce Lee movie, and then we would watch the Kung Fu episodes. And I don't know what crazy station in New Orleans had all of that on Saturday mornings. And I don't know if like my dad had like videotapes or something, but that was our Saturdays. And
Those
so
were your people.
I remember when The Next Generation came out, and I was virulently against it because there was only one captain in my world, because that was Captain Kirk. And like I couldn't even conceptualize that there would be Star Trek after him. I have since learned the error of my ways. Shout out to Picard, like I get it. But hardcore, like, the Hulk and Wonder Woman were seminal people in my existence from a very early age. And to this day, this might be TMI, the King
we're
Kong
here for it.
versus Godzilla trailer came out. And the first trailer was really uncharitable to Godzilla. Let me just say that.
Educate us, Dana.
My dad texted me and my sister and was like, "Did you see the Godzilla King Kong trailer?" Because we were all very excited about it. And I watched it and I was crying. I was so angry at how they had King Kong just punching him. And I'm like, just breathe on him. Like, what are you doing? What is happening? And I was like, here. And my dad was like, "Oh, it'll be fine." And I'm like, "No, it won't be fine." And we got into like a family argument, me and my sister, who were super like not okay with what happened in that trailer. And my dad, who was like, "Y'all need to deal. And also, this is what I think about King Kong." And like we ended up having to have like serious sit downs after with each of us separately, just to be like, "Right, so this is how I felt when you said this about Godzilla. This is how I felt when you said this about King Kong." Like, it was real. So that's the ridiculousness that we get into in our family.
I'm sorry, but how ridiculous, like King Kong and a T-Rex are like comparable sizes. Godzilla is not like a T-Rex. He's the size of a city.
He's radioactive. Like all of that.
Just step on the gorilla and it's over. But I actually have a question from Gray here. Wow, we're really bringing up some old trash. A question that Gray asked me to ask you is when it comes to like sci-fi or TV or books or fantasy, what are some things you like to escape or read and give you kind of hope for the future, if there are any?
So I actually do watch Godzilla to escape and hope for the future. Mia and my stepdaughter watch a lot of Marvel. We probably could recite the Marvel movies, and I know that that's silly and whatever. Same
Nope.
with the first three Star Wars. The second three Star Wars were trash, and then the third three Star Wars turns out are pretty racist.
Mm.
So I hang on to my husband, F you, Kylo Ren, for killing my husband. And those first three movies, those are things that make me feel good. So like if I'm having a bad day, I will legit go put on a Godzilla movie or go put on a Marvel movie and just sit there. Transformers. I know those movies are trash. I still cry every time Optimus Prime does his first transformation. It's an amazing moment for me in particular. So yeah, those are the things that I love. I will say since the pandemic, honestly, one of the few books that I've been able to focus on was actually one of Gideon Marcus's books, Keetra, because that was really a nice book. I've been finding for me with the pandemic, I'm a huge book person, but the ability to focus and not be honestly traumatized. Because I tried to read Kindred by Octavia Butler, but reading a main character with my name, which never happens, being thrust back into slavery was just hard, and it's a sad thing that I've lost my ability to really focus enough to read fantasy novels. But it's been a rough COVID year, man.
Yes. You know,
I-
you mentioned Keetra. Sorry, Beth.
No, you're not.
But we had Gideon on and we talked about Keetra, and I really meant it, guys. If the representation in that book, while it feels just so like maybe regular to a lot of readers today, if I had that book when I was, like 12 or 13, and it has a really decent plot. You guys should definitely read it if you're looking for like a light novel that has, decent representation of LGBTQ community and also Black representation. If you know any young readers, that's a great book.
Yeah, to go back on something Dana said too and shift a little bit, is having it be difficult to read during the pandemic. Also me, I didn't start reading books again like anything until like I started reading actually Name of the Wind with a friend over Zoom, and like I don't know, it was like December, I think, that started happening, and then I was able to finally like have the emotional capacity to read books again, because books, especially fantasy and sci-fi, are so emotionally invested. That like from just dealing with the world, I just did not have that to give in a story, and so just had no interest whatsoever. So yeah, like I feel you, like that was also me. Like I could not read, which is one of my escapisms too. I just couldn't do it for most of the pandemic. So like I also me.
Yeah, I think it's part of the reason why I enjoy Godzilla so much, because he just smashes things. Are you having a bad day? How about I take that building out? And I feel that on a deep personal
It's the
level.
equivalent of like breaking plates on your back porch.
Yes.
So you're a lifelong geek. I'm wondering if you've seen them or care to comment on them, the biggest changes you've seen in the geek community, or just geek literature in general, from when you were younger to now.
Honestly, not a whole bunch. I mean, they're trying to become more representative of different communities, but that's still a frontier that we have not really done well on. I know that Star Trek Discovery has been really great, and I got into watching that, and that has been some wonderful representation, but that's one show.
Mm-hmm.
There's been books and stuff that is out there, but mainstream, like Black Panther was great. That's one movie.
Mm-hmm.
How they did Finn for Star Wars and how they erased that Black man from that narrative, is actually more indicative of how that representation looks, how there aren't Black women narratives in fantasy, and how even with cosplay, I watch Black women cosplayers all the time, and the amount of vitriol that gets put in their direction is really appalling.
Yeah, cosplay in particular is pretty disgusting. It's kind of, you see, I think that because you have a lot of people representing who are Black, representing like white characters, because most characters in the mainstream are white, and it's kind of frustrating. We were having a conversation about our geek community, and cosplay is really seems to be where people just do not hold back. But I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting then to see, you know, there is some change, and but you know, you perceive really not a lot of change, which I would agree with. And you know, it's also frustrating because there is a lot of really good stories out right now. You know, we have authors on Worldbuilders who, you know, we just had Nandi Taylor, wonderful author. The main character is you know, kind of a reflection of herself and her experiences as a Black woman. But again, Nandi Taylor, while doing very well, is, you know, doesn't receive the same kind of publicity as someone like Joe Abercrombie, like a white man. So even though we do have a lot of really great narratives, they're still not as accessible, I would say, which is unfortunate. But yeah, do your part, guys, to actually seek out and read different narratives.
This is a great segue to promo the Worldbuilders Market online bookstore, because we feature numerous authors of color specifically, and we have specifically sought them out to put them in the online bookstore to make it just, you know, one more avenue of accessibility or platform that wasn't previously there. So definitely check out there if you're looking for some good ones, and talk to us too if you want recommendations, because more than likely at least somebody on the staff has read them. So like, I mean, there's, you know, all of us read different things at different times, but like probably someone has read and can make also recommendations too of what's up there. So
and beyond February.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm talking to you. If you feel called out, then you should feel called out. So Dana, you probably answered a couple of these because you've been on Worldbuilders at least once, maybe twice before this. But we like to do a lightning round where we just ask you a couple of things that you like, and if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Awesome. All right, I'll go first, Beth. Dana, alcoholic or not alcoholic, what is your beverage of choice?
Oh, I'm so boring. Water.
That's all right. I got water right here.
Dana.
It's definitely not vodka.
Water is the best.
Well, look at that normal glass you're using there. Yeah. Let's see. What is your meal of choice?
Anything I cook.
Oh, that's fair. That's valid.
What was the last meal you cooked? I'm just curious, that you enjoyed a lot.
So I recently made the timpano, which is this dish that was in this movie called Big Night. And it was a 6-quart pasta dish wrapped in dough with sausage, salami, ziti, 2-3 different types of cheeses, meatballs. Like, it was ridiculous.
Oh,
and it was amazing.
Were there leftovers?
Yeah, for like
I was gonna say, and I'm like, how? Like, I'm like doing the math here, and I'm like, okay.
I cook so much that my friends actually think I have started a cooking show, because I post these things on Facebook and they're like, oh my gosh, when's your next cooking show episode coming out? And I'm like,
I've seen some of them. They're amazing. Like, and right now when you need like less stressful content, here's Dana making dinner. All right,
Yeah.
I feel better.
Okay, Dana, what is a great read that you would recommend to our listeners?
The dictionary. It's my favorite book to read.
Hey,
100%.
that's valid.
Yeah.
Read up on the thesauruses can also be nice when you're feeling bland. I don't know.
Boring or plain. See what I did there?
Beth, ask the next question.
What is something you love to watch? Maybe since we already know Godzilla, besides Godzilla, what are something else you like to watch?
The Golden Girls. They're my
Is
favorite.
that still on Netflix?
I don't know that it's on Netflix. It's on TV Land and it's on my DVDs. So
It's
I
on
can
my
watch it
DVDs.
whenever.
Valid.
I saw it on there, guys. It's on Hulu or Netflix or somebody said Disney maybe. It was on one of those.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I have seen it on a streaming platform today, so it's definitely, and I think it is Netflix actually too. So,
if you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone, real, alive, imagined, or sorry, that I said that like backwards. I meant to say real or imagined, dead or alive. Who would it be?
he's going off script.
Right now, my grandma, who I've not been able to see in 2 years, and it's I would give anything to be able to sit in a room and be able to have a conversation with her because she rightfully so won't let anybody come there.
Yeah. All right. It is 1 p.m. Thank you so much for coming on, Dana. That was an awesome discussion.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your work.
Unlike a lot of the people on here, you're not a public figure, but if you would like anyone to follow you on social media, please feel free to share.
I'm on Twitter under Raging Journey, but mostly that is me being ridiculous. If you want to like see things I'm doing, I'm on Facebook. And that's my name, Dana Pellebon. And I think Instagram is also Dana Pellebon. That's it. I'm just a lady doing a thing around here.
Lady making a difference. All right, guys. We are gonna mix it up today for our boop word of the day will be Viva Beth.
Really? Can I fire her? Is she fired?
I said boop word, JD, because we steal it from Beth, not poop word. Thank you. Jesus. There it is. Viva Beth. Bye, guys.
Hey.